Don't you think that Communist Ottawa is leveraging Communist China against Alberta?
This is a wild one. Welcome back to Moose and Loose. My name's David. Today we've got Jeffrey Rath from the Alberta Prosperity Project having an interview with Vasi Capellos of CTV, and I don't think she's prepared for the answer she got in this interview. Jeffrey absolutely unloading, not holding back, on Carney's corrupt Liberal government, the corrupt media, David Eby. Let's jump into this. It is the craziest interview I've ever seen on CTV.
Hi, Mr. Rath. It's great to meet you. I appreciate you making the time today.
So we have Jeffrey Rath here, who's leading up the Alberta Separatist movement, who's gone down to meet with some of Trump's team. And this report came out that they're securing money. So if Alberta separates, if the Canadian government says, well, you have to have a payout to leave Canada and all this stuff, they would have billions of dollars to be able to do that, secure a loan, all this kind of stuff. This is all just theoretical talk right now. They haven't gone and secured a loan, but the media just ran buck wild with it.
Appreciate you having me on today. Thank you.
I listened to some of the interviews you've given to other media this week, and you were disputing the reporting that garnered all that reaction from the premiers. And I wanted to actually just get you on the record.
Oh, sure.
So we can
the
clarify.
Financial Times piece, I'll say for the record, It was fake news. I'm very careful with anybody to say that we haven't been offered any money by the United States. We're not seeking money from the United States. We're conducting a feasibility study on the availability of a sufficient credit facility to get Alberta over the hump in the hypothetical eventuality that Ottawa is going to play hardball and try to cut off our money once Alberta declares itself independent from Canada. So, that FT article, starts out covert meetings between U.S. officials and fringe separatists. It was ridiculous. It was just a hit piece. By the globalist media. I'm really disappointed in the FT, actually. I used to read it when I was going to law school in London, and the paper's really gone downhill if that's the kind of trash they're publishing.
So what I had noticed when I read it was that I had read other reporting previously that you had made trips to the United States. So
there's no doubt. There's no doubt we're making trips to the United States.
Can you just explain what you are doing?
We've held press conferences to tell people that we're going to the United States. We're exchanging information with senior officials in the U.S. State Department over the aspirations of Alberta for Albertans for independence, and talking to them about the types of things that would help Alberta move forward as a free and independent country. And it's already paying dividends. I mean, we had Secretary of the Treasury, Scott Bessent, the second most powerful man in the world, repeating what we told the State Department officials back in December, that aspirationally Alberta would love to have a pipeline through the U.S. Pacific Northwest to the West Coast, because we're sick and tired of David Eby threatening us with a veto and saying we're only getting a pipeline over his dead body and all of the foolishness that comes out of his mouth. And of course, the reaction to that from David Eby, when he saw that his power was being taken away and that he no longer had power, he was no longer going to have power to constrain oil and gas development in Alberta on behalf of his communist masters in China, right, was to jump up and down and have a hysterical little hissy fit and say that, we're engaged in treason and that real Albertans don't support independence. I mean, it was the most ridiculous display of on behalf of a premier that I've ever seen. He should be embarrassed, really.
If we take Dave.
So let's just slow this down for a second here. So he's right that Scott Bessent came out, made some comments.
Alberta is a wealth of natural resources, but they won't let him build a pipeline to the Pacific.
These comments here is what really spurred everything on, because everyone got to see this. And I would argue Scott Bessent is the Treasury Secretary of the Government of America, but J.D. Vance is the Vice President. He's the second most powerful man in America. And as for him mentioning David Eby's communist masters in China, if you didn't see this video where I break all this down, David Eby does indeed have multiple connections here to the Canada Committee 100 Society and the Wenzo Friendship Society. He gave a $20,000 federal grant to Ding Guo, his advisor. This guy writes for a CCP-affiliated Rise Weekly news publication in China. David Eby at this event next to this Tong Xiaoling, who's the People's Republic of China Consul General for the United Front Work Department. David Eby is definitely in bed in China.
David Eby out of the equation for a second. Can you understand how on the face of it, Canadians would view, some Canadians outside of the ones that support your cause, who are not necessarily unempathetic to the frustrations expressed by people in this province, but who would view the idea of, people here meeting with a government that has, spoken the way it has about this country as a whole as problematic and seeking money to make this
I understand that there's a lot of Ontarians and people in Quebec that suffer deeply from Trump derangement syndrome, but we're not doing anything untoward. It's absolutely, from our perspective, we're just conducting due diligence on behalf of our fellow Albertans. We're serious professionals. I mean, I've argued cases at the Supreme Court of Canada, for goodness sake. I mean, we take what we're doing very seriously, and obviously the attitude of the United States towards Alberta independence, which incidentally is overwhelmingly enthusiastic, is something that informs our movement going forward. If the United States said, oh God, we can't tolerate that, flies in the face of, the communist New World Order, we'll slap a 300% tariff on Albertans if they leave because we want you to remain resource slaves of the communist government in Ottawa, it would be a totally different conversation. But that's not the case. We're gratified that it's the case. And quite frankly, the Trump administration shows Albertans far more respect than is shown to Albertans by the government in Ottawa. Do you think three of us could get a meeting with Tim Hodgson to talk about the need for a pipeline to the Pacific Northwest so that David Eby
This is going to trigger so many people in so many ways.
can't continue to hold us hostage? Of course not, because they want us to be held hostage. So I understand that there are Canadians that are upset, especially in Ontario, that when Alberta leaves, that Ontarians for the first time in their lives are going to have to pay their own bills and pay the bills of the Maritimes that we've been paying for years. I understand that's upsetting to people, but they need to understand that Albertans are done, we're leaving, and there's no more conversation to be had. I know that's upsetting to people.
Do you believe?
Okay, let's break down some of that. So first off, he says Albertans are leaving. I hear a lot of that kind of tone, and in reality, I think mentally it would be better for Albertans who want to separate to maybe hope to separate, because looking at the numbers, they just don't look like they're there. And you're setting yourself up for real crushing defeat if Alberta doesn't separate. Then you feel like you're trapped versus being team conservative across Canada. I mean, there's a lot of conservatives across this country. There's not just in Alberta. There's a ton of them in Ontario. There's even some in the Atlantic provinces. There's a lot of them out here in British Columbia. I mean, there's NDP and definitely some wingnuts out here as well. But I mean, there's conservatives across Canada here. We're all in this together. It's just Alberta, I get it. I grew up in Alberta. I'm born and raised in Alberta, has been getting the short end of the stick for decades now. But you have to remember, the NDP still have pretty good numbers in Alberta, which is really sad, but it's just the truth. So I don't think Alberta will get to separate. So we really need to unite together, fight back against, as he says, the communist Ottawa government. And going back to his point there about Trump and getting more respect from the Trump administration and getting a meeting and all this kind of stuff, like this is going to be so triggering to the left because they're like, oh, that evil Donald Trump is destroying our country. And now these guys are saying Trump is being better to them than our own country. I mean, just look at this objectively. Yes, Trump is putting tariffs on our country. It is wiping out industry, a lot in the auto sector, moving down to America. People are losing their jobs. Awful. Then on the other side, he's right, though. If he asked Mark Carney for a meeting, Tim Hodgson, to come and talk about all this stuff, pipelines and stuff in Alberta, would they come? No, of course not. They don't care. So this really is being trapped between a rock and a hard place. Albertans just trying to get out of it. I think the key here is not to put all your eggs in the one basket, because if that basket doesn't pan out, it's going to be mental devastation for 1 million plus people in Alberta. And Albertans should know, you're not alone. We're all in this together. We're all conservatives here across Canada that want to fix the problem.
Believe, though, that the motivations of the people you're meeting with or in the Trump administration are altruistic? Like, do you think they want what's good for you and people who support your cause, or do you think that they're trying to leverage this to get the upper hand against the country of Canada as a whole?
I've studied foreign policy at the university level. I have an honors degree in political science, and I have an honors degree in law from the London School of Economics. Don't you think that communist Ottawa is leveraging communist China against Alberta? I mean, come on. I mean, we live in the world of realpolitik.
But you don't mind being a pawn in that
No,
fight?
we're not a pawn. I mean, we're talking to them about our aspirations, and we have our goals and objectives. So, we're not a pawn. We're actually more like a rook or a queen on a chessboard, moving forward in the direction that we want to move freely on the board.
It's kind of wild, Vassy, saying, don't you mind being a pawn in that? You just look at the straight math of it. Mark Carney is not getting a deal with Trump. That's the one thing we need to do. He's going over to China. It doesn't work in Canada's best interest. He's 91% invested in America. Clearly, Carney doesn't care what's going on in our country. What I want to know is, what exactly do liberals think is going to happen? That Carney's going to make some great deal with China and now we're going to be prosperous again? There's no way this turns out well unless we get a deal with America.
The pawns are the provincial premiers like Danielle Smith that are being manipulated by Carney and Eby and communist China to do their globalist bidding, as far as I'm concerned.
When you mentioned that.
So I don't think Danielle Smith is being manipulated. She's working the system there as best as she can. She's actually, I think, doing a great job. Danielle Smith knows that the only way to work with a net zero zealot like Mark Carney, she has to speak his language. And she just wants to get a pipeline started so we can get rid of Carney eventually, have Pierre Poilievre come in and fix all this stuff. But at least the pipeline, the consultation, the work towards it is being done. That's why she's agreeing to that net zero nonsense, because she knows there's no other way to get that pipeline. And if Carney says no, then it's just going to further push separatist movement. I think Jeffrey's just looking at this more cut and dry, that Danielle Smith is trying to work with Carney and he's the net zero zealot, thus she's not doing a good job. But it's not that simple. It's way more complicated, and she's doing the best she can, and she's getting leverage from Carney by making it easier for the separatists to vote. It's creating more leverage. So respect has to be given where it's due there for Danielle Smith.
You've met with people in the State Department. You feel as though that message has been conveyed to Scott Bessent. That's why he made the comments he did. How high up are the meetings that you're taking? Are there names, for example, of people that you're meeting with that we would recognize offhand?
I'm not sure about that. Probably. I mean, we're meeting at a very high level. People in our meetings are going, direct.
Stephen Miller?
I'm not going to say. I mean,
why not?
We're not, because we have an agreement with the people that we're meeting with that we're not disclosing the identities of the people that we're meeting with. So
why not? May I ask?
Because it's an agreement. So that's all.
But again, would it be reasonable to question the motivations of making that?
Well, that's probably why we're not talking about it. We don't want them being bothered by people from the press in Canada asking them silly questions. They don't want to be wasting their time answering questions from the press, right? And we're fine with that. We don't care. I mean, we know already that our meetings are paying dividends when the U.S. Secretary of Treasury is announcing the fact that the U.S. would be open to a pipeline through the Pacific Northwest to take David Eby and Communist China out of control of the Alberta oil field.
May I ask then, in a different way, have there been...
So what happens when people hear this kind of stuff and they've never heard this before? They're like, huh? Communist China, David Eby, what? And then they start Googling and start looking things up. Let's just try it right now. So I've not tried this before. I just put in Communist China, David Eby, and what do we get? The first article. This is what people watching mainstream media are going to see. They're going to click on this and China's intelligence. Oh, this is a good one too. So this is a map somebody made. This is like an old school moose chart linking a bunch of people. And David Eby's on this one. Also Justin Trudeau right here. Dominic Barton, Yun Pao Wu. So if you remember from my moose chart here, I have Yun Pao Wu down here. This is what the receipts here, a speech to Canada Committee 100 Society, Yun Pao Wu. Sam Cooper has a ton of information on this. So that's what we're getting as the first article that people will see, and they'll just start reading this and like, huh, what's going on here? So David Eby is mentioned once in this article. It says right here, the map from Ottawa to Victoria connects United Front aligned businesses, political media organizations, prominent Canadian leaders, including former BC Premier Christy Clark, Teresa Watt, Premier David Eby's advisor Ding Guo. So as I mentioned many times, there's Ding Guo right there, connecting to the Canada Committee 100 Society. There's actually some other connections here I don't have on my moose chart. Vincent Chen Yang, Kenny Zhang. It also highlights the role of Senator Yun Pao Wu in facilitating the entry of Chinese state-linked entities into Canadian institutions. Then people are like, huh, let's just keep looking. What do we got here? A shaky coalition and near-death election by Eby puts under scrutiny at NDP convention. So this is from last year. And so if people read this article, there's a mention of China down here. It mentions the shipyard here, Communist China getting that $1 billion contract. Nothing else about Ding Guo or any of that kind of stuff in here. The third article, going to the breaker. Oh, geez. Yeah, this is a good article too. So this breaks down a lot of those connections. There's that photo I've got on the moose chart. And then this just goes right into it. So people start reading this stuff. They're like, oh, David Eby's not the guy I thought he was. Mainstream media bringing on Jeffrey Rath. It's going to harm their overall goal and narrative by bringing him on.
In conversations, among yourself or people in the movement with, for example, as high as President Trump?
No. Well, I mean, I haven't. I'm not sure about David Cameron. He's not really part of our movement and part of what we're doing. He's the leader of the Republican Party of Alberta. He claims to have been to Mar-a-Lago and whatever. We don't need to meet with President Trump. We're really technicians when it comes right down to it, right? At the end of the day, our next delegation to Washington, we're going to have bankers, economists, corporate lawyers, et cetera, to help with this feasibility study that we're conducting, right? And we're going to be putting together, what a potential deal memo could look like and put together a complete dossier so that we can just hand it over to whoever the government of Alberta is in power and say, hey, if Ottawa is giving you a hard time, here's an easy way out. There's a large credit facility that's available through Goldman Sachs or JP Morgan or whoever in the event that Ottawa tries to cut off your money.
On the question of
going back to the Republican Party, so there's now a Republican Party of Alberta, but this is Jeffrey Rath from the Alberta Prosperity Project, the Separatist movement. It gets a little bit foggy having two different groups there.
Feasibility and the situation that you just lay out. What does it say that if you are preparing for Ottawa, as you would characterize it, to play hardball, that you would then lean on credit or whatever it ends up being from the United States? Like, to the people who support your movement, are you not kind of moving from one master to another?
The entire world runs on credit. How much does Canada rely on the United States? Secretary of Treasury Bessent. No, just let. So what? If Secretary Bessent wanted to end Canada tomorrow, it would take one memo to all of the bond rating agencies, Moody's, Standard and Fitch, and Poor's, to say that Canada is a poor risk because of all the various things that the United States is going to do with Canadian credit, and Canada would be over. So Canada is being supported by the United States. So just stop with this silliness and trying to create this conflation somehow or other between the Alberta independence movement and being beholden to the United States. I know it's a fear-mongering talking point of the mainstream media with regard to Alberta independence, but we're not buying into it. It's ridiculous.
Well, let me.
It's a fair point he's making there, because really we are dependent on America regardless. In this case, it would just be Alberta dependent on America. It does seem like a fear-mongering question.
Actually, if you don't mind, challenge you and just ask, look at what happened based on the scenario you just have outlined because of our dependence on the United States. Look at what they're able to exact right now. What you are telling your supporters, with great respect, is that you will be independent. You will be free of the suppression. Right?
Nobody's independent in the modern world. But do you think that we would be running to communist China the way that Mark Carney is? Mark Carney's making Canada dependent on communist China. And to quote a good friend of mine, David Redmond, who's one of the best, North American defense analysts going. David Redmond stated clearly on a policy panel, just 2 weeks ago, communist China is not a trading partner. They are an enemy. So you want to talk about treasonous, swearing allegiance to communist China in Beijing while invoking the New World Order, and then coming back to Canada, threatening war with the United States of America under Article 5 of the NATO treaty, certainly smacks as being a lot more treasonous than anything that we're doing.
You can't argue with that. I mean, he's locked and loaded with the facts. I mean, I've been putting this stuff out for a long time. Mark Carney going over to China. I mean, I have all this stuff on here. I mean, it would take forever to go through all this stuff in one video. Mary Ng, Justin Trudeau. I have all the videos here. All the different appearances. They're so wrapped up in China. All these connections to all these different people, all these different organizations like the Canada-China Federation of Entrepreneurs directly linking back to the People's Republic of China website. Friendly links. This interview is interesting because Vassie is so put back by this. She's never had someone come at her so hard before. I would say if Jeffrey's watching this or somebody on his team, let her finish her questions, let her speak, because when you interrupt her, it diminishes a bit of what you're saying. If you wait patiently and let her speak and then speak, you'll come off as more calm and collected. People will listen to you more. I get Jeffrey here. He's amped up. He's patriotic. He's pissed off about what's happening in Canada, but it's important to think about these kind of optics if you're going on national television, especially since Vassie's not intensifying her language back. She's staying calm and collected, so then it's only one-sided.
Now, I have to say, I have interviewed at least 5 ministers from the government in the last 2 weeks since that China trip and pressed them very hard on exactly what you're laying out. Is this really the kind of partnership that we want to align ourselves with? I understand the point you're making. My point is you have convinced people, and lots of them who have stopped me here, that what awaits a separate and free and independent Alberta is true independence.
No, there's no such thing as true independence.
Do you think your supporters understand that?
Stop interrupting for a second.
I'm just asking.
90% of our trade is north and south with the United States.
So that's an example there. She didn't finish her question. Then he's saying, stop interrupting. Well, she didn't finish. Let her finish first, because it just comes off as aggressive when you do that.
States of America. So all of this phony, we hate the Americans, Canadians should be afraid of Americans, Alberta must be completely independent from the United States of America. We don't live in a vacuum. So even the premise of your question, quite frankly, and with respect, is quite silly.
So you basically don't envision, for example, ever being truly free of the United States, even if the administration switches.
The premise of your question,
a Democrat could be elected after President Trump. The premise of your question is completely
silly. Nobody ever envisions a day where the Alberta economy is completely decoupled from the economy of the United States of America. 90% of our trade is north and south. So that's not going to change if a Democrat gets elected. All of our relationships, business relationships, familial relationships, etc., will remain. That doesn't make us less independent. I mean, the premise of your question, again, with respect, is quite silly.
I'll take it. That's okay. I'll leave it on that.
He's right there. I mean, really, no nation is independent anymore, truly, because unless you provide critical minerals and food and everything for a nation, every nation is relying on someone. That's why supply chains matter so much. That's why China has so much power with their critical minerals and more the refining of those critical minerals. Because in reality, if someone holds all of, say Canada had all the uranium, we have more high-grade uranium, I think, than any other country on Earth. If we withheld that from every nation on Earth, Earth when nuclear power was becoming the big thing and every country wanted it, then they would devastate all those nations, so they're dependent on us. Just like you have countries around the world who use oil and gas, they're dependent on the countries that produce it. So really, he's right here. No country is truly independent. There'll always be trading relationships. Her question there is kind of dumb. Like, it's a mainstream media, like, talking point, stupid kind of question as usual. It's a fear-mongering question. In the comments here, there's liberals that are triggered for sure. Where have I heard this rhetoric before? This guy sounds like Trump. If you want to leave, leave. You can't take the land with you. Held hostage. What a clown. These people don't realize when you see these comments like held hostage, like, they don't realize how bad China is. They should go there. They should go visit the Uyghur camps and see how bad things really are. I did an entire video on that on my other channel that got deleted. So I know a lot about it. There's a lot of personal attacks on him, how he looks. He's going to have heart attacks, all this kind of stuff. He sounds like Trump. He looks like Trump. This guy is delusional, lunatic. This guy sounds like Trump. He also looks like he was crying and having trouble breathing, emotional. Love it. Keep it up. It's yang or yang in this comment section here. When it comes down to it, I get for Albertans, the easiest way out of this madness seems to separate. But I think, honestly, the easiest way to fix this problem is we just need to get truth out about Mark Carney, because right now people don't know who he is and they think he's just like a steady hand Mr. Banker and he's dealing with Donald Trump and it's a tough thing and that's why things are not going so well. If people start posting stuff everywhere, grocery stores, social media, everywhere about Mark Carney, who the guy is, his net zero agenda, why it's so dangerous, he's gone over to China, what his true intents are, people start realizing that this guy's 91% invested in America, he doesn't care about Canada, then some people will flip over. And really, the election was so close last time, we don't need a lot. We just need some people to come over to the side of reason, and then we'll finally get our country back. That'll be significantly easier to fix the problems in Canada versus Alberta separating.